Hey guys, big news. This episode has officially been cleared for public release. Just barely. Which does feel appropriate because we're talking about kickoff meetings. And that's something that's supposed to create alignment. But somehow manages to create confusion, ambiguity, and at least 3 follow-up meetings. Let me start with this. Once we had a kickoff meeting for the kickoff meeting. I am not joking. By the end of it, we still didn't know who the core was. But we did know 3 other things. There were donuts. 2, someone had prepared a 45-slide presentation about execution synergy. And 3, the program manager quoted a TED talk about leadership. Meanwhile, the contracts team was quietly Googling the definition of something called execution roadmap, which, by the way, turned out to mean another meeting later. Welcome to the GovCon show, where today we're talking about one of the most sacred ceremonies in government contracting, the kickoff meeting. The event where everyone gathers together to pretend they're aligned while secretly wondering what the program is actually supposed to do.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.
Broadcasting from deep inside the Federal Acquisition Labyrinth, this is the GovCon show. This show is for acquisition pros, wannabe pros, and procurement insiders who need a place to unpack the chaos. We speak fluent contracting and sarcasm. No clearance required. This is the GovCon show. And away we go!
Welcome back to the GovCon show, where the Federal Acquisition Regulation meets the real world. I'm Tim Magnuson. This show is for the people working inside the reality of government contracting. The ones holding the whole thing together, while everyone else is aligning. And today, we're tackling something every government contractor has experienced. Kickoff meetings. The ceremony, the ritual, the calendar invite that shows up and immediately makes you question your life choices. Because kickoff meetings, in theory, are important. They mark the official start of the program. They align the teams. They clarify expectation. They establish communication channels. Remember I said in theory. But in reality, reality can be quite different. In reality, many kickoff meetings accomplish something very different. They consume 3 hours, create 12 follow-up meetings, and leave everyone wondering, what's actually changed? So today we're going to talk about kickoff meetings. The good ones, the terrible ones, and the ones that make you question your entire career path. We're going to break it down. The kickoff meetings that go wrong, why they go wrong, and how to actually run one that doesn't destroy the next 6 months of your program. So before we go any further, let's talk about the first category of kickoff meetings. The ones I like to call kickoff confessions. These are the stories people tell after the meeting is over. Usually quietly, usually in the hallway, maybe on a Teams chat, over a cup of coffee, where someone quietly asks, "Hey, did that meeting really accomplish anything?" Let me give you a few examples of what I'm talking about. Confession 1. I call this one the invisible leadership program. Here's a real situation I may have or may not have heard about or may have actually experienced. The contracting officer announced they were only attending the kickoff meeting to observe. I'm just here to observe, they said as they sat down at the end of the table, which sounded reasonable until the agenda started, because the first presentation was assigned to the contracting officer. Everyone in the room learned that when the presenter said, "Let's start with the KO." Now, half the room thinks the KO is running the meeting. The other half thinks it's the core. And the program manager is trying to take control. Contracts, we're sitting there thinking, we don't even have leadership alignment, and we're 5 minutes in. Nobody knew for sure whose meeting it was, which is a fantastic way to begin a government program. That's not a kickoff. That is a display of poor preparation and organizational confusion on full display. Here's another one. Confession number 2. The contract that didn't exist. And this one is for real. 45 minutes into the kickoff meeting, a subcontractor administrator realized that the prime contractor did not actually have a signed contract yet. Let that sink in. The kickoff meeting had begun for a contract that didn't technically exist. That's not kickoff. That's kickoff theater. And then there's the modern classic, the virtual kickoff meeting, where half the participants are frozen on screen. Someone's talking while muted. Another person's introducing themselves for the third time because their audio keeps cutting out. And somewhere in the background, someone's dog is barking like it's opinions about the statement of work. Now, hearing those stories, you might think kickoff meetings are hopeless. But the truth is, kickoff meetings can actually be very useful when they're done correctly. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. Which brings us to something I call the agenda from hell. You know this agenda. You open the calendar invite and immediately regret every decision that led you to that moment. The meeting is scheduled for 3 hours. And the first item on the agenda is introductions, 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Which means by the time everyone finishes explaining their job titles, half the meeting is already gone. And then comes the second agenda item, corporate overview presentation. Fascinating, because nobody in the room asked for it. But we're all about to see slides explaining company values, organizational philosophy, and a photo of the headquarters building. None of this helps deliver the contract. None of this says program execution. The slides about company values, nothing about program execution. And then, after the corporate slideshow, the meeting enters phase 3, which I like to call the live reading of the scope of work. This is where someone reads sections of the statement of work out loud, even though everybody in the meeting has already received the document, which creates one of the strangest experiences in government contracting. 20 professionals sitting quietly, watching someone read a document they already have. And the moment you begin to realize something, this meeting should have been an email. Let's talk about something that makes kickoff meetings especially painful. The slide deck. I call it slide deck fatigue. Some kickoff meeting slide decks contain 50 or more slides, sometimes more. Slides about company values, slides about communication and philosophy, about collaboration and frameworks, slides about innovation principles, and eventually, one slide that actually explains the contract. And it's usually slide number 43. By that point, everybody in the meeting has mentally left the building. We all know and even expect that every kickoff meeting is going to include a risk discussion. Oh yeah, kickoff meetings love to talk about risk. but not real risk, safe risk, corporate risk. We need better communication. We need alignment. We need collaboration. That's not risk management. That's corporate poetry. Real risk sounds like we don't have enough people, the scope of work conflicts with pricing, the subcontractor isn't ready, or the schedule is unrealistic. But in kickoff meetings, these conversations don't happen because kickoff meetings are treated like a performance, not a working session. And in real life, the contracts team is watching everything. While everyone else is focused on slides, contracts is sitting there thinking, how's this going to work for our CPSR? How's it going to look in a file review? Because kickoff meetings set the tone. If responsibilities aren't clear, that shows up later. If risks aren't addressed, that's going to show up later. Someone will have to reconstruct the story that should have been told here in this meeting. But at the end of the meeting, someone says, I think we're all aligned. Are we? Alignment is not head nodding. It's shared understanding. Understanding of scope, understanding of risk, understanding of success, and what happens when things go wrong. But here's the interesting thing. Kickoff meetings don't have to be this way. In fact, a well-run kickoff meeting can be incredibly valuable. So let's talk about what a good kickoff meeting actually looks like. A good meeting does a few very simple things. First, it confirms who is responsible for what. Who is the contracting officer? Who is the core? Who is the program manager? Who is responsible for the reporting? Second, it confirms communication channels, how problems are reported, how performance is tracked, how changes are handled. And third, it's got to address risk. Not vague motivational talk, real operational risk, schedule risk, technical risk, contract risk. And that leads to one of the most important moments in a kickoff meeting. The moment when someone asks the question, has everyone actually read the contract? You'll be amazed at how often kickoff meetings reveal something uncomfortable. Someone on the team has not read the contract yet, which is a bit like showing up to a book club and announcing, yeah, I skimmed the cover. The kickoff meeting should not be the first time people learn what the contract requirements are. That should have happened weeks earlier. Now let's have something that quietly ruins kickoff meetings. Too many attendees. Some kickoff meetings include 30, 40, sometimes even more people. And half of them never say a word. They're there because someone added them to a meeting invitation, which creates a strange dynamic. A meeting with dozens of attendees, but only 3 people are actually involved in the conversation. That again is not collaboration. That's an audience. And finally, we need to talk about the thing that happens after every bad kickoff meeting. The follow-up meeting. The one where someone says, we should schedule another meeting to clarify a few things. Which actually means the kickoff meeting did not actually clarify anything. Now the program has 2 meetings, and some, well, even less clarity. So if we were rebuilding kickoff meetings from scratch, what would they look like? They'd be short, focused, and action-oriented. They would define responsibilities, clarify reporting expectations, address the real program risk, and most importantly, they would end with clear tasking, because a kickoff meeting should launch work, not launch another PowerPoint. So if your meetings create more confusion than clarity, you've got to understand it wasn't a kickoff. It was a car wreck with an agenda. And somewhere in the organization, a contracts professional is going to spend the next 6 months trying to untangle what happened. Thanks for spending time with me on the GovCon show, where we talk about the realities of government contracting without the corporate slide deck. Until next time, respect people's time, read your contract, and remember, if your kickoff meeting could have been an email, it probably should have been. If you found value in this, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who still thinks kickoff meetings are just a calendar invite and a slide deck. And if you want more content like this, head on over to thegovconshow.com. Until next time, respect people's time, show up prepared, read the contract, and ask the uncomfortable questions early on. Make sure everyone leaves the room with the same understanding of what success actually means. Because if you don't align at kickoff, you'll be arguing about it at closeout. See you next time on the GovCon Show.
If today's episode sounded a little too familiar, that's probably a sign. Until next time, keep your files tight, your logic tighter. Remember, if your compliance approach is built on checking boxes, you're building risk. We'll see you next time on the GovCon show.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.